Hey there, everybody. Welcome to a brand new episode of the Belonging Life podcast. I'm super excited to have you here today. I'm beginning a new season here. Yes, I'm beginning it this late in the year. I think that people have more time in the summer to do this. I'm thinking about just creating most of what I do in the summertime and batching it and then releasing it over the course of time so that people can just listen to it at their leisure, and then I'll be able to simply release those over the course of the year and come back right around summertime, just before we hit summer, rather, and get a good 90 or so days worth of content and release something once a week out to you. But I'm so glad that you're here with me today. Listen, I wanna talk to you from this subject today. And for those of you who do not know me, I do like to be as honest as I possibly can and talk about things that we typically don't talk about in church. And this is one. Having pastored, having been involved in ministry for now well over 3 decades, one of the challenges that I see a lot of, that I've encountered myself, and that a lot of people may see and don't understand, is the weight and the wounds of pastoral ministry. The weight and the wounds of pastoral ministry. And so, one of the things that we are going to talk about here today again is again something that is deeply felt by a lot of pastors, but they don't really get an opportunity to talk about it much, and a lot of that just is around the vulnerability and insecurities of what it means to be a pastor. And while a lot of pastors will not tell you this, I'm going to tell you that what you're about to hear from me is the truth. If there's a pastor out there that tells you that this isn't the truth, they've always been on the strong end of things, beautiful. Have a conversation with them. But I want to help you understand the person that you see week in and week out who stands up and shares sermons, who gives insight, who talks about staff, about building, about the strategies and the different things along those lines that they're looking to do for the ministry, about building out the ministry, whether that's moving the ministry, whether that's adding additional ministries, taking away various different ministries. I'm here to make sure that I give you some true information on that, some insight on that. It's going to be honest and going to be very real and very raw to be able to help you. Okay. So this is for you to put on your big person pants. Okay. This isn't going to be for you all who just simply want to criticize leaders. That's not what I'm after. But I do want you to know what you're seeing so that you can, first of all, know how to pray. Two, that you can understand the weight maybe on the other side of the assignment of the pastor. And if you're a pastor and you're looking at this, maybe this has been the time, this has been the thing that you've been looking for. You've been looking for somebody to come out and say it for you because you couldn't say it for yourself. Well, I'm here to do that for you today. So let's just kind of jump into that, because a lot of pastors, for the most part, and you guys know this, they're seen as spiritual giants. They are. They're just seen as spiritual giants. And the truth of the matter is that pastors wrestle just like congregants do. And for whatever reason, having been on both sides, people don't see it that way. And that's just the reality. People simply, they don't see it that way. There's a lot of doubt that goes in with pastors about things that they're doing. And again, they're not going to talk to you about it mostly. There's a lot of isolation that happens with pastors a lot of times because they feel a lot of the weight, and we'll get into this again, insecurities of this. We can use those words interchangeably if you'd like to, weight slash insecurity of what it means to be trying to lead people. It's heavy. It's really, really heavy. And then there's the performance side of things, right? Where pastors feel like, hey, I've got to perform week in and week out. I know that feeling of someone making it seem like you have to perform, you have to be on at all times, and that you can never be off. God forbid that you misspeak, any of those kind of things, or somebody doesn't simply like something that you had to say within your congregation. All that can be a problem. But my goal here is for leaders and congregants to be able to build empathy on both ways, to be able to understand what the people are hearing, seeing, and for the leaders, those of you who are leaders, right? I mean, for those of you who are in congregants, to understand what your leader is actually going through. So, the first thing I want to talk to you about is the hidden burden, if you will, okay, of pastoral leadership. And I'm going to give you the two passages of scripture out of this, and I'm going to talk about them here briefly. And the first one's going to be 2 Corinthians 11 and 28. Now, this is something that I think is really important for you to grasp, because this is what it says. And this is Paul talking about. He says, and apart from other things, there is the daily pressure of my anxiety for all the churches. See, this is the stuff that's in the text. Apart from other things, there's the daily desire, right? Daily pressure on me of my anxiety for all the churches. Now, this is ESV version. You may have another version. Yours may say something differently, and that's fine. But I want you to get the crux of what I'm saying, the point here, okay? I want you to get the crux of what I'm saying here. And then the second passage is Hebrews 13:17, right? It says, have confidence in your leaders and submit to their authority. Do this so that their work will be a joy and not a burden. Now, this is both of these texts are very, very important. First, the man or woman of God is simply stating, I have an amazing burden on my life, right? The anxiety that I have for the churches. This is Paul having oversight, right? And some denominations, depending on where you come from, this you would be like a bishop or an elder of some sort that has oversight over multiple churches. But the point is that we know that Paul did these journeys and that Paul was struggling with, hey, what is this? The anxiety for this, getting these churches to live godly, to live righteously, to do the things that God wants them to do. And then we jump over to Hebrews, right? In chapter number 13 and verse number 17. And it simply says this. It says to the congregants, it says, listen, have confidence in them, submit to their authority. Now, let me be clear, just to be clear, no one's telling you to submit to poor authority. No one is telling you to submit to poor authority. I am certainly not telling you to submit to poor authority. In fact, hold poor authority in accountability is what you should do. But there's some other key points in here. Is I want you to understand leadership is both a calling and a crucible. I need you to get that from the person that you see standing up there every day, whether they're a traveling evangelist, but mainly pastors. I mainly want to focus on pastors. Leadership is a calling and a crucible. Okay. Um, Pastors typically carry their own pain, right? While carrying other people's pain at the same time. It's something that's just not talked about. Pastors typically have to carry their own pain. And I'm going to tell you, as a person who has pastored people, there were a lot of things that I made an attempt to make sure that I let my wife avoid encountering, my kids avoid encountering, while I myself was going through this struggle. I was struggling myself. And so you need to understand that the person that you're looking to, they're human. So they're going through some of the same things you do, whether they're a pastor or not, does not matter. They're going through some of the same things that you experience: family issues, challenges, maybe financial issues, could be health issues, emotional issues, marital issues, whatever the scenario is. But oftentimes they're carrying their own burden and carrying the burden of other people because of how people expect them to show up. Okay. And then the pressure to always be strong, this creates inner tension in pastors. And so for a while here, I'm going to tell you, for a while here, for like about a decade or so, really, we started seeing a lot of pastors who were actually unaliving themselves. The pressure was so great. It was so strong to perform and to be this certain person and to show up every week. Honestly, I'm going to be honest with you. I think pastors should take off summertime months. I do. I think pastors should be gone June and July, at a minimum, June and July. I do. I think they should take 2 months. But here's what part of the problem is. I also think that pastors should have in place people that they've developed who are strong enough to continue to carry and lead the ministry while they're absent. I think pastors need to sit down. I think they need to restore themselves, first and foremost with their relationship with God. Then I think they need to return to have an investment in a reconnection with their spouses and their children, and just back into some things that don't have anything to do with ministry. specifically, right? Just to get themselves rebuilt back into these places and rebuild their lives. So I think that this is important. Okay. So psychologically, I wrote down a couple of things here psychologically, right? About the role strain. Okay. Is that the emotional and personal resources that a pastor has are typically depleted at various different times. Sometimes you'll be looking at this person standing up there speaking, and you start saying to yourself, something's going on. When you know that, not only is that a time for you to pray, but that's also a time for you to recognize and realize if you do have an opportunity to encounter this leader, that you should ask this leader those questions about their life. Hey, how are you really doing? Not the whole blessed and highly favored thing. All that sounds good. I get it. I get it. I get it. But how are you really doing? Right? Sitting down and having those conversations. And then pastors oftentimes operate under what I like to call, this is the note I have, toxic strength, right? Again, that belief that they have to show up like that. So it's toxic because they feel like every time they take the pulpit, they have to be wearing a Superman shirt, a cape, right? And you don't. You don't. So if you're a pastor and you're listening to this, you don't have to show up as Superman week in and week out into your congregation. God hasn't called you to that. Then there's like the insecurity that happens within the pulpit, everybody. Okay. These are just realities. There's insecurities that happen in the pulpit. Let me give you a couple of scriptures to help support my thought here. So First Kings 19 verses 3 and 4 says Elijah, after a spiritual high, flees and fears and says, I have had enough, Lord, take my life. Right. So listen, there's a lot that goes on with leaders, right? With pastors. Second, well, let me give you First Timothy 4:12 too. Don't do not let anyone look down on you because you are young. Let me just say something to you. The- For people who've never stood behind a pulpit, it's incredibly intimidating because you're walking through this tension. You're walking through this tension of, I have this stuff in me that I really didn't ask for. That you're like, God put this assignment on me in my life. And sometimes the way that they see themselves is reflected a lot of times, maybe in how they talk or they don't talk, or their desire to disappear. I told you earlier about this isolation, right? Where they kind of disappear from people. So a lot of times when people are first new in the ministry, they think they have to do everything. They show up at everything. I'm here, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here. I'm this, that, and the other. This person's sick, that person called. So they show up at everything. And they think that this is going to win them points. But here's the reality. The moment they don't show up, then they will quickly find out how fickle people are. And people will be like, well, I know you did this, you came to this, you came to my daughter's basketball game, my son's baseball game, my other daughter's, my grandson's boxing, whatever the scenario is. And as soon as you don't show up for something, well, I called you when Aunt Carol and Uncle Fred were sick and you just didn't show up. Listen, sometimes it's just not going to be enough. But in these things here, too, it depends on the experience that you've had. It depends on where you've been, what school you may or may not have gone to, right? There's people are aiming at you to decide who you are, your qualifications, different things along those lines. It's really, really important, okay, that we're super clear on this. But let me take it further because these are some of the parts where insecurity starts to come in, okay? Insecure, listen, I know that your pastor is awesome. I know that your pastor is awesome, but we're humans. So all of us, every person you see has insecurities. Even the people who do amazing stuff that you appreciate in the arts and entertainment world, they still have insecurities and make millions of dollars around it. It just is what it is. Okay. So let's just deal with that accordingly. So one of the challenges that pastors have is this: there's comparison with other ministries. Ooh, I don't have enough time to go into that. There's the comparison that happens with other ministries. There's so many different ministries around, and people are they compare themselves to it. Is this ministry growing really quick? Is this ministry not growing really quick? Do I have a building? Do I not have a building? Are we setting up and tearing down? Especially if you're a church planner like I was myself, you get into this place where you start looking at everybody else and then you start thinking, oh, I'm supposed to be then. You go to conferences, you go to all this other kind of stuff, thinking that there's this blueprint that somebody can give you, which let me touch on that for just a moment. Whenever I have pastors call me now and start talking to me about various different things that they want to do, hey, I'm trying to do this, I'm trying to do that. Here's two things I ask. I say, first of all, did God tell you to do this? Or are you feeling desperate because you feel like you need to change something? Right. The second thing I tell them is this: no matter what information you get from this person, you need to chew the meat and spit out the bones. And I'm going to tell you why. You need to chew the meat and spit out the bones simply because of this. Because what they did in the location that they're in, you may not have those same dynamics in the location that you are in. So you'll get all of this stuff and then try to implement it in your dynamic, and it won't work. It just simply won't work because there were other factors that were around it that made it work for them. And some of the stuff that they're not telling you is that they did trial and error over stuff, but they're selling you on the stuff that worked and not telling you about the stuff that didn't work and how long it took them to actually get into this place. And so there's a lot of different things that are really important, but pastors have a lot of comparison issues, um, even with other people within their congregation. I'm not going to hesitate to say these things because, again, this is the kind of stuff that we need to be talking about in ministry that we don't talk about in ministry, even with other people within their congregation. Pastors have insecurities over these things. If there's someone else who speaks better than they do, maybe physically looks better than they do, and I'm not talking about just in their face. That could be the issue too, but I'm talking about even their bodies, right? Maybe they take care of themselves better than that particular pastor does. There's a lot of insecurities around there. Maybe someone who's more articulate than they are in certain kind of ways. There's a lot of insecurities that come from there. The second thing is harsh criticism and ungratefulness. Let me say something to you again. Pastoring is incredibly difficult, and a lot of times I hear, especially nowadays, I hear a lot of people who will go after pastors and different things along those lines. And sometimes I have to be honest with you. If they're wrong, they're wrong. But a lot of you are wrong too. Like your heart is nasty. Your approach to dealing with the pastor of that local congregation is nasty. You put them up for, you eat them for lunch every Sunday. After you go out and there's a group of y'all who go out and just talk about what's going on. You're not praying, right? You don't have your heart in the right place when it comes to how you're supposed to cover the leader. And then there's the ungratefulness, as I was talking to you about before. Sometimes it just doesn't matter. Sometimes it just doesn't matter how much you do for somebody. It's still never going to be enough. This is really tough on pastors because pastors typically have families, right? Typically they have wife and children, right? They have families, even if their children are grown. Um, so for example, I remember I had the way that we set up the leadership in the churches that I pastored. I'd always have someone who was oversight for like hospital visits and different things along those lines. It's not that I didn't want to go to the hospital. It's just that I needed to make sure that I still invested in my home, in my marriage, in my kids. And so oftentimes too, if someone went to the hospital because they had pneumonia, I didn't need to go to the hospital because they had pneumonia. I could pray for you right from where I am, right? Different things along those lines. It was small moments like that where I literally had people who would call back to the church from the hospital and say, I know you sent sister or brother so and so, but when are you coming? It was just never enough. And these are things that we have to be careful of because I think that this gets way out of balance and it becomes super problematic. The third thing is a lack of support and encouragement. Encourage the pastor as often as you can. Encourage the pastor as often as you can. Let them know first and foremost that you're praying for them, really be praying for them, but encourage them. Tell them they're doing a great job. Tell them you appreciate all the hard work, the effort, and everything else that you see that they're doing. Just let them know. It goes a long way. I promise you, it goes a long, long way. Now, here's the thing that I want you to know from a psychological standpoint of view, and you're going to get these points as I move through the rest of this. Leaders, insecure leaders, they'll develop like a messiah complex and thinking that everything depends on them. Now I'm gonna tell you, the first church I planted, I had to leave that church, and the reason why I had to leave that church is because I developed this in a certain kind of way, and I was tired, like I was beat, I was worn out, I just did not have any more left in me. In addition to that, I was dealing with some people who had come from a lot of places and a similar place. And I was dealing with these people and dealing with these people. I thought that I had to show up completely different than the place that they came from. And that was exhausting. So a lot of what was authentic to me was extended beyond my authenticity to try to be something else, to make sure that people felt safe and secure. And that wasn't really my job. And I think that we can get into that, and that could be troublesome. So a lot of times when pastors hear that you come from a really rough situation, like from another church, I mean, specifically, they'll go out of their way to try and do everything they can to make sure that you feel comfortable, especially if they, love having you around, or you bring some type of gift or talent to them that they need within the ministry. And that can become very challenging. But a lot of times they think that everything depends on that. It happens in the church. So I was at everything. I was at everything. And this isn't to say that I didn't have good people. I'm saying this was me thinking I had to be at everything. So I wasn't necessarily doling out responsibility and empowering other people also under me to do the things. And the second one I did, but we'll get to that another time. Dr. Henry Cloud, who's a guy I listen to all the time, he's a Christian psychologist. He said, "You were never meant to be everything to everyone, only what God has called you to be." And I think that this is really, really important for us to understand. To understand. Now, this section number 3 here. Here's what I want the church to understand. This is what I want the people to understand. Let me give you these 2 passages, and then I'll talk about them. Carry each other's burdens, and in this way you fulfill the law of Christ, right? That's Galatians 6:2. And then 1 Thessalonians 5:12-13, it says, "Acknowledge those who work among you, hold them to the highest regard in love because of their work." All right. So let me just give you a couple of points out of this, right? The congregation typically sees the pastor's public victories, but never their private battles. Typically, public victories, but hardly ever their private battles. They have private battles. You just have to know that, okay? And honor doesn't mean idolize. We don't idolize the pastors. I know people who have made idols out of the leader that they are connected to, and will mistreat you if you have a different way of seeing something, of viewing something, or whatever, excuse me, that's going on within that church. They will have a problem with you. I'm talking like a severe problem, wanting to harm you and hurt you. But do not idolize these pastors. What we do is we pray for them, we uplift them, and we encourage them. That's what we do. But we do not idolize pastors. We do give honor to whom honor is due, but that's what we do. But we do not idolize pastors. Um, Vulnerability also that comes from the pulpit when a pastor's telling you something. I've had to do this many times when a pastor's telling you that they're going through something, that they're dealing with something. Um, Listen, meet that with grace. Like meet that with grace. You're not dealing with a perfect human being up there. You yourself are not a perfect human being. I don't understand how people can sit there week in and week out and look up and be like, "Hey, this person has got to be on all the time." They're not. And they're full of insecurities. And you need to know that. All right. And so Romans 12:8, of course, speaks to us and lets us know that encouragement is one of the most powerful things that you can ever do and give to somebody. Just encourage them, speak hope over them, speak life to them. Say, "Hey, listen, how are you doing? What can I do for you? Is there anything I can do for you? How can I really be praying for you?" Like legitimately do this, all right? Because they are struggling in these places. Now, here's what pastors need to remember, all right? I'm gonna give you these 2 passages of scripture. Second Corinthians 12:9, right? My grace is sufficient for you. My power is made perfect in your weakness. And Philippians 1:6, he who began a good work in you will carry it on to the day of completion. So there's two things. One, that in your weakness, God's grace is sufficient. Two, God is the one who's completing the work in you. He's with you, even in your weakness, even in your struggles, even in your difficulties and things along those lines. What I'd like to encourage pastors to do is make sure that you find people. Make sure that you find good people that can come around you, that you can have honest and sincere conversations with. Make sure that even your team, the people that you're leading, you're not trying to show up to them as Superman and let them know I'm the man. I got it all covered. I just no. Make sure that you have the right people around you, people who can hold space for you, people who can still follow you and still see your vulnerability. People who can still, let me say that again, people who can still follow you and yet see your vulnerability, see your insecurities, still be there for you, hold you up at a high level in that. This is really, really important. And I think it's probably one of the more major missing things that I find with a lot of pastors. They don't have that person. You know why? Because they don't want anybody to know, Pastor, you don't want anybody to know that you're insecure. You don't want anybody to know that you have weaknesses. You don't want anybody to know that sometimes you feel jealous of other people. You don't want anybody to know that. So you go and you try to show up as though that is not happening in your life. It's not helpful. Real talk. It's just not helpful. All right? God doesn't call us to be perfect, right? He doesn't call us to be perfect. Vulnerability, sir, is not weakness. It's my second point out of that, right? And healthy leaders seek counseling. Healthy leaders seek counseling. They seek help. They say, I need help. It doesn't mean that you're no longer a leader. It doesn't mean that you don't have the ability to lead. It doesn't mean that somehow you're soft. It doesn't mean any of those things. It's healthy people say, wait a minute, this doesn't work for me. What I'm doing isn't working for me. I need to go seek counsel. That's what we do. Get mentoring. Go find somebody over you. I speak to people. I'm speaking to a man right now who wants to start pastoring a church, who's going to plant a church. And this happens to me four, five, six times, maybe over the course of a year. I'm finding somebody says, "Hey, speak to this guy." I end up having these conversations with these particular individuals, and I just tell them the truth. I'm just honest with them about all of the things that have to go on, especially when it comes to dealing with ministry, because it's not just Sunday and it's not just preaching a message. It's the insurance you have to have. It's the liability things that you have to pay attention to. It's the areas that you have to make sure that people are safe, background checks, all these kind of things. You know, people showing up on time, people committing to things, people working in various different areas of your ministry, making sure that the things that you need to have to run that ministry, they work out really well. A lot of people don't realize that this is a part of the heavy weight that happens with a lot of pastors. It's a part of it. It's a part of the really, really heavy weight that happens with a lot of pastors. And they just think, oh man, they're good. Why? Because everybody hugs them and loves them at the end of service and wants to talk to them or whatever, whatnot. Those are some of the loneliest times because it was like you're going through something and people can't even see it. Let me say that again. Sometimes the end of service was some of the loneliest times because people would walk up to you and tell you how awesome the message was or what was going on or what's going on in their life, and they can't even see that something is going on in yours. That's just a reality. And this is a good reminder for people in congregations. This is a good reminder for the leader too. Stop showing up false and fake because you don't have to. We just need to be able to be real. Right. And sometimes too, I think what's perplexing to pastors is that sometimes the best message will come out of you. God will do something incredible to with you while you are going through like the most difficult time. And people are like, oh my God. And you're thinking to yourself, man, shoot, I needed that. Okay. So listen, this is something I want you to know. So Hebrews 4 and 15, We just need to understand from a spiritual insight perspective, okay? With pastors, what they need to remember is this: is that pastors have to give themselves a break. They have to be honest with themselves, right? Look at themselves and give themselves a break, and don't become performance oriented. Become gospel centered. Just preach the word. Be instant in season and out of season. So here's my closing thoughts that I want to give and action steps. All right. So, pastors, seek a support system, spiritual friends, mentors, and a therapist if necessary. Yes, I am big on going to therapy. I just am. You may not be, and that's totally fine. But get the other two if you don't. Spiritual friends, right? And somebody who can mentor you, who can speak into you, not somebody who's in the same situation you're in, who's bitter, somebody who's been bitter, but now they're better and they've climbed out of it. All right. Embrace your humanity. 2 Corinthians 4:7. God uses jars of clay. They're imperfect. Embrace your humanity. Okay. For the congregants, pray for your pastor every week. Sincerely pray for your pastor. Speak encouragement. Don't assume they hear it enough. Don't assume that they hear it enough. Okay. And then protect your pastor. Guard them. Guard them from people who you see are just trying to pull on them all the time and want something, but they're not necessarily committed to the body that you belong to as a whole. Let me say that again. Protect your pastor from people who are only trying to shine but aren't committed to the body as a whole, not just your pastor, because I that drives me nuts whenever I hear that. And pastors be like, that person don't have the heart of the house or my heart. Stop it. They need to have God's heart, sir, not yours. God's heart, not yours. It's how we get in trouble. They don't have my heart. Of course, they don't have your heart. They don't need to have your heart. They need to have God's heart. And you're his servant, so you preach and teach and give them what they need from there. All right? Last thing I want to say is this. Look, the pulpit is not a pedestal. It's a place of service. But even servants bleed. Even servants, y'all. Servants bleed. Listen, I appreciate you guys taking the time to hang out here with me and have this brief conversation, if you will, or for me to at least give you this little bit of information. I just want you to keep in mind that pastors are people too, and pastors trip too. Pastors trip. Pastors trip because a lot of them are, again, this is not a put down, incredibly insecure. And this position of power, whenever they feel like it's under attack, whenever they feel like somebody's attempting to attack it, I ain't even get into the other stuff because, again, I'm not trying to put people down. I want people to understand the scope of these things. Pastors' wives, too. I probably should do something about this. One of the things that I find with a lot of pastors' wives is that they will sometimes try to overprotect them from things that aren't really happening around them. But you know why? Because they know the insecurities of that man. They know the insecurities of that man. They're very clear on it, right? And so sometimes they can come off too in a way that you could be like, hey, what? Hey, what just happened right here? Right? You're not trying to be anything. You're not trying to do anything. But this pastor's wife is looking at you with a jaundiced eye. It could be because you have the same skill set. It could be because you have the same experience. It could be because they're just simply threatened by you. There's something I just don't like, something weird about that person. I just don't like them. No, they understand who their husband is and what their husband's fears and insecurities are. And so they're trying to protect them from that. These are all things that you need to know. So some things we shouldn't take personal because a lot of times, again, we're just dealing with a human like you and I are. All right. Listen, once again, second close. Thanks for listening. I appreciate you guys hanging out. Tell somebody about the podcast. Also, tell them about our Bible study that we have online every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Belonging Life Bible Study. You can go to our Facebook page and become a member. And in doing so, at that point, we onboard you. That allows you to jump into the Bible study, and then we're happy to have you. The way that we study this Bible will be explained to you. I could just briefly tell you that we go book by book, and then sometimes we jump in and out of subject, but we're specifically going book by book so we can break it down and people can grasp it and understand it. So I appreciate you hanging out with me. God bless. We'll talk to you soon. Take care.